So this is VP24, and like all these, it came from that Advent of Code site, but it's just very nice. You're going to make an assembly code interpreter of a very basic kind. So there are only 3 instructions in this assembly code. Nop does nothing. By the every instruction has a 3-letter verb, essentially, which is technically called a mnemonic in assembly code, and then a parameter. And there's only one parameter, and it's always an integer. So nop will do nothing, and the parameter doesn't matter. ACC will add one to the accumulator. This is the way all old processors work. The one I originally learned on, the 6502, was an 8-bit processor that worked exactly this way, and that dates from mechanical adding machines going back for the last few centuries, where you may have seen these. They used to have them in stores. They had cash registers. You'd type in a number, and then you'd hit a big button with the heel of your hand, thunk, and that was the accumulator. You put in numbers, and it would add it to the accumulator that kept a running total, so you could calculate the total number of purchases. And that's how these processors worked. They have a special register in the processor called the accumulator, and you can just add and add to the accumulator, and it will accumulate the total. That's all it does. But they were based on earlier mechanical adding machines when they got to the first processors. And the other thing you can do is you can jump. Jump will change the order of instructions. So here's a program. Nop will do nothing. This will add 1 to the accumulator. Jump plus 4 will jump 4 instructions ahead, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll go to this one, add 1 to the accumulator. Jump minus 4 will go 4 instructions back, 1, 2, 3, 4. Add 3 to the accumulator. Jump minus 3 will jump 3 back, 1, 2, 3. And you might notice we've done this before. We executed this before, so now we're stuck in an endless loop. It's going to go forever around and around the loop. It's never going to end. And so this is, of course, an error. One of these instructions is bad, and if you run this program, it'll freeze your machine until you turn it off or kill this process. But that's the point. And so that's what this shows. These are the order in which they're executed. 1, 2, 3. These are in order, but the jump causes it to skip down to 4, 5, and this jump causes it to skip back to do 6, 7, and this jump goes back, so the 8th instruction you execute is equal to the 2nd instruction you execute. So now you're stuck in an endless loop. It's going to run through those instructions forever. It's never going to hit this one. It's never going to hit that one. And it's never going to go off the bottom to do whatever comes after this. So that's the point. That's the first thing we're going to do. So that's the problem statement. And so you just want to input this file here, which is a much longer series of instructions. And the point of this, I'm just going to, so let's just write one that does the example here. And let me shrink that down if I can. There we are. All right. So now we know what's going on. I'm going to use this program. And what I propose to do is to do the technique I mentioned before. If you're sleazy and you don't have any pride, you can solve problems this way. There's a carriage return. So I can do find carriage return and replace it by quote, comma, quote, and replace it everywhere. Right now I can put another quote here, another quote here. Now I've got a quoted list. I can put a square bracket here, a square bracket there. Remember what I said almost all the time, when you don't know what kind of data structure to use a list. A list is almost always the right data structure to do pretty much everything in Python. So now I got a list. So I'll copy that and go to my coding environment here. And I'll just delete this old stuff. All right, so I'm going to call my code equals that list. Okay, and I'm just going to put an extra carriage return here so you can see it with that crazy box getting in the way. All right, so there's my instructions to execute. Looks like I got about 9 instructions. And so now, trying to think of the smartest way to make a loop. I don't want it to repeat commands, so I think I'm going to have to say done equals, I suppose I could use a Boolean variable, false. I think it's lowercase false. All right, and now I'm going to say while, not done. Okay, then I want to execute a command, and I could make a function to do it, but I think it's enough to just use, I'm going to have an index counting through here. So we'll have index equals 0, okay? And so now the current command, I'll call it cmd equals this thing, code sub I. That's the current command. And now I have questions if command sub 0 equals n, then it's a nop. And you could put a comment here to remind you of that. And therefore, do nothing. That's going to be probably continue, I think. And maybe I can just get rid of that branch entirely. But anyway, what I like to do is this. Then, since you elif, let's just copy this. Okay, if it starts with A, then it's supposed to add to the accumulator. And I should have started the accumulator at 0. Okay. And so then this is the add. So then I'm going to have to add the accumulator plus a value, and I'd have to pick that value out of the string. So hopefully you guys are familiar with this. So I do, now the way the command works, it's always 3 letters, then a space, and then the number. So if I start at 0, 1, 2, 3 and go to the end, I'll have the number part. So I can just add integer of command sub 3 to the end. And that should do it. That should be a readable part. All right. And then the other one is, now I could do an else and assume at this point that anything remaining must be the third command, which is jump. But that's kind of sleazy. This is the difference between good coders and bad coders. I'm generally a sleazy coder because I use the right penetration testing tools you only use once. But if you get more professional, you have to do error handling. Consider everything bad. So instead of doing an else, I'm going to do an elif. And then have this condition again, where I'm going to look for something that starts with J. And by the way, this should have been A. All right. Now it's a jump. And the reason I did, if it's a jump, then I'm going to have to change the I. So I plus equals that integer, the parameter. It will move the index to that location. That should do it. And the reason I did an elif is so I could do this, else. Now I can print an error. All right. And then I should probably exit if I'd had that happen. That shouldn't happen, but you know, this is what you do if you want your code to work well, is you handle the errors instead of just letting it crash and burn. All right. So it looks pretty good. Now the thing I did is because I had to move the instruction pointer here, I guess I better adjust the instruction pointer inside these if statements, because you don't always go to the next command. If it was a jump, you go somewhere else. So if it's a nop, I do go to the next command, so that's I plus equals 1. And it's the same if I did an accumulator. I just change the accumulator and then I go to the next instruction. So presumably this will do it. And now I have to determine when it's going to be done, because this is going to get stuck in the endless loop and run forever. So I might as well do that. Let's see what happens. If I run it, it's either going to crash or it's going to, okay, everything's invalid. Okay, so that's bad. And it's stuck in an endless loop. So I stop it here. Good that I have the ability to interrupt it. And let's see what I've done wrong. This is n, if, elif, else. So how did it get there? The first part of the command, oh, there's a colon in there. Oh, what's that colon doing in there? It's never going to work. It's trying to compare one character to 2 characters. That's why nothing ever works. Okay, that might work better. Let's see. Okay, your session crashed for an unknown reason. All right. Do I get ACC is not defined? Well, that's true. I called it A. I do this a lot. I'm inconsistent with my variables. All right. So that should be A plus in. Okay. Give it a shot. Okay, now it's working and running forever in an endless loop. So I just have to kill it, but I'm not getting syntax errors or anything stupid. I need to consider what my done condition is. So what's the done condition, folks? How do I know when I've hit the end? Throw out an idea. I need to know when it's looping. Now, how am I going to detect when it starts looping? Any proposals?
You could have some kind of loop that works in a range. We're not going to read them. If it's repeated if a sequence is repeated more than a few times, then...
Yeah, even once. As soon as it goes to the instruction I've seen before, I know it's going to loop forever.
Okay.
So how do I find the first time it goes to an instruction I've seen before? What would you do?
Maybe I'd make an if condition that if those have been met in sequence.
It'll be an if condition. So what should I put here for my if condition? I want to somehow know if it's done. So, for example, down here, after I've finished executing the current command, I want to do if something, and that'll be when I'm done. So what is it going to be if to tell if I'm done? Let me shrink this a bit so we can see more of the code. All right. I need to record the commands I execute. I is the index. So I think I need to make a list of them. That's how I would do it. Like I say, I always use lists for practically everything. I'm going to say executed equals an empty list. And then each time you complete a command, here, I'm about to execute command I, so I think I'll do it here. Executed append I. So that will keep track of the commands I've executed. Now, what's the if to see if my current command is in that list? Folks remember?
So we should see if a sequence is in the list already.
Yeah, but it's just an individual number. I just need to know if I is in that list.
Okay, so then if I in executed.
That's right. If I in executed, then I've hit a command I've done before, and I'm done. And so I guess I'm not quite sure what I want to do there. I think I'll just print I and command and say there. That should do it. Let's see if it works. Okay, and it's still going forever and fouling up. So let's find out what's wrong. Now that's why I like demonstrating this. This is how I really do things. There are people who are really pros and they use like a debugging environment that makes it all fancy, but I come from a time before we had any of that. So the way I debug everything is by putting print statements everywhere. Now the question is, why did this pass? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print here I list. Unless you guys know the answer.
I want to say it's because did we actually make it stop after?
Oh yes, I think you're right. You're right. That's right. I just need to put an exit here, don't I? Yeah. Very good. Okay, that might be the answer. Good. Now this is what I was going to do to debug it. I was just going to print out the condition. Why is this condition true at an unexpected time? But I think you're right. I don't need to do that. Let's try this. Nope, still doing it forever. So,
is it because it's in the, is it because the if statement is part of everything else?
No, that's, well, while not done, well, when it hits the exit, it should quit. Although I'm not sure these Google environments actually do.
Did we set it to done?
That's true. That's what you're right. That's a cleaner answer. Let's do done equals true. Good. Let's see if that does it. Oh, there. Good. Oh, there we are. So here it is executing commands, and this I think matches the problem example here. Let's move this to the side so we can see them both at once. I think it's working now. There. So this was 1, 2, 3. Which I guess I started at 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, I'm off by 1 in my numbering scheme. Now let me just fix that for completeness. Let's start I at 1. Now it will match the numbering scheme used in the example. And now that should match the problem. 1, 2, oh, it didn't do 3. All right, so it looks a little funny, but it ended up at jump minus 3 is a repeat. It looks like it kind of fouled up on me. So let's see. 1, 2. Is not an accumulator. The jump, looks like the jump had some strange effect. Oh, well, that's a jump. Oh, I didn't do the actual function, although I did do the function of a jump. The I goes up by this. All right. So it did commands 1, 2, and then it jumped to 6. So let's find out why it's doing that. Let's print I executed. Let's put the command here. And maybe that will help understand it. This is how I debug everything. I just print things until I can see what the mistakes are. So it does the accumulator and the jump. Oh, it seems to skip the NOP in the first place. Oh, this continue is going to do something like break out of the loop. I don't need that. Let's see if that helps. I still never see the NOP. That's because I printed the command. It's the next command I printed. I didn't print the current command. I've added something to I. So what I should really do is print current command up here so I can understand what's going on. And I, let's do CMD and I, there. Now I'll be able to see what's going on a little better. All right, so the current command is accumulator +1. Ah, I know what happened. I did this, but Python always starts at 0. I skipped the first command. I have to start at 0, but to match the instruction, I'm going to print I +1, so it'll match what I see in the other problem. This is, by the way, a very common problem. Many computer languages start counting at 0, and it is confusing, and there's an endless chain of off by 1 errors like the one I just made. I'm just going to make it clear I'm adding +1 to the internal number to get a number that's going to match the documentation of the question. Okay, now I do the NOP, and then I do the accumulate, and then I do the jump. And let's compare that to what it should do. Okay, so we do NOP, accumulator, jump. Then it should jump down to here, and the next one should be accumulator +1. And it is, yes, accumulator +1. Okay, so now if I look at the numbers, they're all off by 1, so 0, 1, 2. Then this would be 6. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, you go here, then 7. Then you jump back to 6, 5, 4, 3. It looks good. Then you go to 4, and then you hit the repeat. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you, and you can clean it up. But that's one way to get it going. And in the challenge, you have to do a little bit more, but that should get you started. So I'm going to check for comments in the Twitch. If I can get them to show up. All right, no new comments. All right, so I'm going to stop this recording. Yeah.